Hello and welcome to 21st Century Vitalism. This is a podcast exploring how we can best maintain a sense of energy, inspiration, and wakefulness while navigating the complexities of the modern age. My name is Brett. I'm going to be your host on this journey, and in order to do this, we're going to be having a multidisciplinary conversation with a wide variety of speakers from all over the world. This typically includes spiritual teachers, somatic therapists, artists, activists, environmentalists, pretty much anyone who I feel is not only talking the talk, but really walking the walk. And today's episode is no different as we are sitting down with New York Times bestselling author and former executive editor over at Cracked.com, Jason Pargin. For those of you not in the know, Jason is the author of the John Dies at the End and Zoe Ash series. This past year, he released his first standalone book called I'm Starting to Worry About This Black Box of Doom, which is the center point that this conversation orbits. In that book, he tells the story of Abbott Coburn, a disillusioned Lyft driver who gets roped into an insane cross-country journey with a mysterious passenger and a potentially dangerous black box. For this book, he effortlessly blends social commentary with dark humor and suspense while exploring the themes of paranoia, technology, and the importance of human connection. So for this conversation, we use this as an outline as a way to talk about pertinent topics surrounding social media and its influence on our perceptions of the world. Things like, what happens when we live in a culture where everybody is encouraged to be a celebrity? Or what are the effects of parasocial relationships replacing our real-world ones? And are we really as divided as a country as our devices are telling us? It's a juicy conversation that is wholly relevant for everyone living in the modern age. So I hope you enjoy listening to it as much as I enjoyed recording it and editing it. If you want to spend more time with Jason's work, I'd strongly recommend checking out one of his many books, which you can find at johndiesatttheend.com or pretty much every online retailer. Beyond that, though, you can follow him on just about any one of these social media platforms. He posts daily on TikTok and Instagram with short, fun, insightful little videos about random things you would probably never have heard about otherwise. So that's what we're going to be doing today, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. If you want to support this show, you can head on over to patreon.com/21st Century Vitalism and consider signing up for that. It would mean a huge deal to me, and I thank all of the folks who have already signed up. If money's not where your strong suit is, that's okay. You can also follow us on Instagram, like us on Facebook, and subscribe over on YouTube. If you're watching this over there, leave a like, comment. Anything helps. So without further ado, please sit back, drink some tea, do some stretches. Most importantly, open your hearts for Jason Pargin. So Jason, we are now live. I just want to start by saying thank you so much for giving me some of your time, you and your Badger Conda. It's a great pleasure to have you on the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing all right, and I actually was almost late getting to this recording because this is somewhat relevant what we're going to talk about today. I started Googling what happened with the drones. Do you remember the drone panic of December of last year where there were drones over New Jersey and a bunch of East Coast, and everybody's like, was this an alien invasion or are they? And then, I don't know, it lasted like 2 weeks, and I never heard the follow-up to that. Did we figure out what those were?
Yeah, there was like a memo that was like, trust us, we know what it is, but we're not going to tell you, but we do know and it's okay, which is actually like the least trustworthy thing they could have said. Yeah, so you didn't have any update on that when you looked into it?
No, when I search it, because I guess it all got kind of derailed after the election and the aftermath of that, and then with the new president, I see here where the White House put out a statement saying, yeah, we've looked into it, and these were all authorized flights.
That doesn't really tell us that much, though.
Because I don't know if people don't remember this from 6 months ago. There was all these theories about, is it a secret government program? Are these Chinese drones? I read tons of articles about how the technology, they could be using this. This is the new spy system, and we're defenseless against it because how do you stop these things? They're everywhere. And then suddenly people were sighting them all over the country. And then suddenly every light in the sky became a drone. which is obviously what gave us the UFO phenomenon decades ago, because most people don't pay attention to flights and weather balloons and stuff until
Yeah.
they're looking for something weird. And so it's like, wait a second, I've never noticed those lights over my house before. It's like, well, yeah, but that's because you didn't look up until. And there was this brief moment where it was a panic, and then it just went away, and then everybody was fine again. So I guess we just need something to panic about every once in a while, because we get bored with the normal things. Like, the normal things to panic about didn't go anywhere, but it's like, yeah, but we want something different.
Yeah, well, the normal things aren't as seductive and intriguing as the idea of like aliens. It's just kind of like more sad and kind of depressing. So
Yeah.
it's like, well, it'd be nice to just kind of worry about something extraterrestrial at this point. Have you ever had a UFO experience?
I've not had any
Oh,
paranormal experiences at all. People always ask me this because my first book that made my name was a horror novel. So they assume that I've seen a ghost or a cryptid or something. I've not seen anything like that. I've not had a psychic premonition. The only borderline supernatural thing that ever happened to me is I had an object that I lost in a way that was impossible, and then it returned again. But I don't know. Maybe that was my brain misfiring. But if I saw light in the sky, I would just assume it's a meteor or something. It does not make sense to me that if aliens arrived here, that they would arrive in a slow moving craft that was like easily visible. It seems like the technology would be something, I don't know.
yeah, I would really love to believe. I also haven't had any experience, but I went through a little bit of a phase last year where I was watching like YouTube ghost hunters, and there's something about that specific medium of entertainment that is just so compelling and ridiculous at the same time. But there's a part of me that's like, I want to believe so bad, but I don't think these YouTubers are going to be the ones to convince me.
Yeah, and I this is something that I cover a lot in my books. And I talk about in videos that this is relevant to all of this, that people have a reason for seeking out different things to be afraid of. That if you have a million, I have this belief that the most unhealthy state of your brain is to have a million little things weighing on it, where it's not one big thing like I've got a surgery coming up and I'm very nervous about how it's going to go, but rather it's this bill is overdue. I've got a leak under the house. I've got an ant problem in my kitchen. My boyfriend is mad at me. It's 100 little things where you can't focus on any one. I feel like that is more destructive to your peace of mind in your brain. Whereas when you've got one big problem, it almost like lets you focus on it. And I'm not saying that people in natural disasters or whatever are happier, but in that moment when it's just help my neighbors get out, we've got this one big thing, and everybody can rally around it. I think the fact that you can see people inventing that for their life, where I'm going to trade in all of these annoyances, all of these things that are weighing on me, and focus on QAnon or the conspiracy to kidnap the children for their adrenochrome, something that's so exotic and outrageous and terrible that it's like, none of this other stuff matters.
Yeah.
I can, because I can focus on this, I don't have to worry about the fact that I've blown my paycheck getting addicted to sports betting on my phone, or all of the little things that are actually destroying your life. If you can focus outward on this one big threat you've decided exists, and it's like a coping mechanism, because the
Yeah.
fact that it's not real does help. But I think the sum total of the stress in your life actually goes down when you find one big thing to hate or be afraid of versus all of the million things in your life that if you actually paid attention to them, it would be overwhelming.
Yeah, well, I think there's something about that too when you're really conspiracy minded. A lot of it is kind of unfounded, and there's not really a lot of like experts in the field. So you also have this opportunity to kind of be the expert in your community and in your extended networks, where you're the one who's synergizing all of these different bits of information, and you're the one who's really at like the cutting edge, and everybody else doesn't really know. So that kind of also empowers you in a way that I think a lot of people are lacking that sense of agency and empowerment in their day-to-day lives when all of those myriad little things are adding up, and it's really hard to navigate. But when you're like, oh, I totally know, and my job is to convince other people, there's something that really, it just gives you a lot of ability to act on it as well.
Because you're in a culture, and maybe this is old news to everybody that listens to your show, that simultaneously says your life is worthless unless you mattered in some way, unless
Hmm.
you were special in some way. But it's also harder than ever to be actually special in some way. You have this
Yeah.
contrasting thing where, well, if you weren't some sort, if you didn't change the world somehow, then who cares? What you know, what was the point of your life? But also actually changing the world somehow as a normal, average, everyday person is all but impossible. So you have to invent a way that you believe you helped change the world by being one of the few possessors of the secret knowledge or whatever, because at some point you've believed that it's not enough to just be a good friend, good husband, good father, good wife, good mother to your children, good member of your church. Like no, none of that stuff. You're just one of the worthless little people. You need to have done something amazing. You need to have been in on the secret. And the tragedy is not that person at some point believed that it wasn't enough just to be a decent citizen, to keep your home in good shape, to just the things that are actually hard to do,
Yeah.
maintaining your own health. If you've done that, that's, I don't do it. That's miraculous. But people can't be, it's like you can't be proud of the little things. You need some big cause that you have joined that will make it so that none of that other stuff matters. It kind of gets life exactly backward in a way.
Yeah, well, it seems like it's an outcropping of like celebrity worship, and I think people who grew up, especially like the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, we were kind of indoctrinated in this view that, yeah, in order to be seen as successful or to be desirable, you have to have had created a platform, you have to have some big thing out in the world. And it's interesting with the advent of the internet and social media where more people have access to celebrity than any other time in the world. Now you can just sit at your home, play video games, and make jokes, and then you get a following. So now we have this like opportunity to kind of be seen by people, and there's more widely known people now than probably at any point. And I wonder if that's also there's probably some downsides to that as well.
It's interesting because you know, obviously there's a catch 22 here. I have 1.3 million followers across 11 different social media platforms because it's the only way I can sell books. If
Yeah.
I just put my books out into a shelf, nobody would buy them. I have to go out, and there are authors out there whose just their name on a book cover will sell it. And I'm not one of those guys. I've got to push it out into the world and try to explain why this book is interesting, why the ideas are interesting. So I'm online constantly all day, every day as part of my job. This was something I never wanted. I worked anonymously for the first decade I was writing. I didn't want my work associated with my name, my personality. I didn't show my face. I didn't have an author photo for a long time because it's like no. I want the work to be famous. I don't want people to be asking where I live, what I eat, what clothes I wear. I don't want my personality to be the product. I want that to be separate. The work, and then I am, and I can walk down the street, nobody knows who I am. And eventually the world changed to the point where people kind of won't buy their product unless they associate it with a face. And I never want to get to a point where it's like the books are just part of the merch I'm selling. Like Logan Paul has, he's dropping new socks with his face on it. Limited edition. These are $50 socks with Logan Paul, whatever. And I never wanted that. Like people are buying it because I love this guy's social media and his personality, so I'm going to buy his merch to be part of the Jason Pargin fan army. I never wanted it. But that's the way everything is sold now. That everything, like you putting yourself out there, and almost every author has got an Instagram presence, or a YouTube presence, something, because you have to at this point. The way things are sold, and partly because you can now write a book with AI, so the book itself is not something special. It's like no. You have to put your face out there and convince the world I am an interesting person with an interesting personality. So I bet you'll find my book interesting too. I never wanted that. I never wanted that to be how it works. So now the idea that, I'll make a video, and if it's a hit, it'll be seen by like 5 million people, but I don't get rich from that. Like there was a time when that level of of an audience would mean you're a famous celebrity.
Yeah.
That's to just be a middle class author. I have to have that kind of reach to an audience. So it's weird because that kind of celebrity is so available now, and because such an unremarkable person like me could achieve it, it's also been cheapened because I can go out. I don't get recognized on the street very rarely. Once a month, I'll be walking my dog and somebody will stop me and say they love my TikToks.
Yeah.
But if I got to where people were constantly recognizing me, I would probably delete everything. I never wanted that
Yeah.
to be my life, but it became clear over time, if you want people to keep noticing the books, that's what you have to do. You put your face, your personality out there, and then you get the comments where somebody has noticed that, he's like, oh, he's wearing a wedding ring. Is he married? Where does he live?
Yeah.
What did you have for breakfast? And I try so hard to rope off all of my personal life with this because I never wanted to be selling that as a product, but the system desperately wants all of this to be part of the commodity that you're selling. Every little thing about who you are, how you live, your habits.
Yeah. And it's a really interesting phenomena because I think the people who benefit the most from it are the social media companies. And like there's this encouragement to kind of commodify yourself and to like turn yourself into a product. And I think that that's a really interesting thing that everybody's kind of grappling with as they're trying to grow a platform is like, well, what's my unique niche? And I think that there's a lot of like objectification and compartmentalizing on like what is my unique offering and how do I package this in a way like it's a very different way of relating to the world and with PR than I think any other time in the past. So I guess for you in your process of stepping into those waters as somebody who is lucidly aware of all those dynamics, I guess how was that for you to kind of like really dial in like what is it that I want people to associate with me and my brand? Was there a little bit of a kind of a hiccup with that or was it something very natural based on your years of writing?
I just kind of got dragged into it a little bit over time because when I started writing on the internet, and my whole advantage in life was that I came along right at exactly the right time, where I was a young writer in my early 20s when the internet was invented. So I first started making a blog probably around 1997, 1998. This is a time when most people still did not have internet connections in their homes. So I got in on the ground floor, and my whole thing was, well, this is wonderful because it's just text pictures. It's just my writing. It's my beautiful words. It doesn't matter what I look like, where I'm from, what connections I have. It's just me talking to my audience. And I thought it was going to be like that forever. And then probably around 2012, when I worked at Cracked, for those who don't know, I was the executive editor at cracked.com for from 2007 to 2020. Like they had me come be on their podcast. And I was a nervous wreck because it's like, what is it like what's a podcast? It's like a radio show. And why? Why would they want to listen to me? That we were taking the things we wrote about, just these interesting little observations about pop culture and society and how it interacts, and just turning it into a conversation. Was so self-conscious about how my voice sounded, did not want my picture on there. We did not do video. Like this was before YouTube existed, for us at least. Didn't have a presence there. When we started pivoting to video on that site, I did not appear in any of the sketches. I did not want my face on camera. I did an author photo that they put in the book jacket. I reluctantly just took a photo of myself in my bedroom holding like this little Jason Voorhees stuffed bear on video. You can see it behind me.
Yeah.
I felt weird doing that. I went through a bunch of different versions of that photo. Just did not want, I didn't want people associating a person with the words. I wanted the words to exist on their own. So like the first book, it was credited to the main character in the story. It's like, no, this is just, the character is all of this. There's no author, the true death of the author. There's no author behind this. And then as time's gone on, and as I've seen social media pivot from a text-based platform to a photo-based platform to now an entirely video-based platform, it's like if you want to maintain a presence, you have to have video, and the video wants your face. So in 2022, I downloaded TikTok. I'd never been on there. I'd never looked at it. I didn't know really what it was. I knew it was short form video, but didn't know why it was such a big deal. And I spent like 6 weeks just watching videos and seeing how it worked. And other people like me, old guys they weren't lip syncing to songs or doing fashion. They were just kind of doing interesting trivia. Like Hank Green was on there. I thought, well, I could do something like that. And then just started making videos and hated the look of my own face and my own facial expressions and every little thing, but just made myself do it. And then in a year, I had like 150,000 followers. I have like over 600,000 now. But just had to acclimate myself to it. So at age 47, I was for the very first time making internet video and having to teach myself how to do it and how to use. I didn't know how to edit. I didn't know how to do any of that stuff. But it's like, again, I'm not saying every author has to do this. I know George R.R. Martin is not on TikTok. I don't think Stephen King is on TikTok. But if you're not a superstar, and I'm talking about the type of author where their name is like huge on the book and the title of the book is like that at the bottom because nobody cares. It's like, no, it's the latest from the guy. I don't care what they called it. I'm not that guy. Every book I have to sell from scratch as here's why you will like this book. And if you want to reach people, that's how you do it. And it is such an out of body experience because unlike the kids today, I wasn't raised on this. You know, you can go on TikTok and they've got their toddler on there. Like these kids have been on camera from the moment they came into the world. They were on camera as babies. That wasn't me. I did not appear on camera until my late 40s. And now it's, 3 years later, I've made, I don't know, 2,000 videos, a lot. I do at least one a day, and it's second nature. But if I could change the world so that it was just the books going out under a pseudonym, would do it in a second. Because I still wish it didn't work this way. And I think I'm complaining when I'm not the one who has it worst. Who has it worst is female authors. Because the social media platforms so heavily skewed toward the young and thin and conventionally attractive that the filtering process for there is very ugly, because the idea that in order for them to get people to buy their mystery novel or whatever, that they have to do their hair and be pretty when nobody has ever cared what I look like. So I cannot imagine what it's like for the people who from day one have been immersed in this and have been judging their personal worth according to, the engagement metrics. Because I at least was an adult with a fully formed brain before I even got on the internet. And then I was an old guy before I actually got on social media, and I knew who I was and was secure enough in who I was. For somebody who your brain is still forming and it has to form along with what your audience is telling you, I can't even speak to what that's like because that wasn't my experience.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting thing, especially when we bring in the notion of the algorithm, this idea that, I mean, a lot of the times, we take in content and it kind of informs us who we are and what we like. And then by our levels of engagement, we're informing the algorithm, which then feeds us. There's this kind of communication that's taking place. And I do wonder at a certain point, especially with people who are developing, who don't really know who they are, and then they're informing the algorithm. And it's almost like we're shaping the next generation algorithmically. And there's this sense of like, we don't really have an opportunity to form who we are these days when we're really plugged into these platforms. And it's almost like a runaway train, it feels like a little bit.
Well, it's funny because we've always had a stereotype of celebrities as being crazy or eccentric, because it's like, well, these people have no concept of how real life works because they have to conform everything to the audience. So it must be like getting kicked in the head by a horse. Like your ability to process the world is so totally skewed because every little decision you make about what you wear, what you look like, and who you interact with has to be thought of in terms of, well, how's the audience going to interpret this? So your own desires, your own personality, it becomes the quote was that celebrity is a mask that eats the face. I don't know who said it. A famous author said it. I apologize for not knowing who. But the idea that, you put all of your effort into the presentation, then it was always understood that there's nothing inside, because all of the effort is into building the facade, because you're doing it based on what the audience has told you they want to see. So it's like the true you, your true desires, the true things you wish you were and wish you could say. Do you ever actually get to say that? Or is it all based on throwing something out there, seeing how people react, and then altering it? Because through all of human history, the feedback you were looking for was the other people around you, the other people in your tribe, in your village, in your family, in your church. Well, that is totally different from a mass of strangers who have no real personal stake in your life. They're not close to you. They don't know the real you. So the idea was always that, oh yeah, celebrities are weirdos. You try to talk to them in public and they're either rude or they're cold or they're odd in some way. They've got weird habits and they're all eccentric, because we all understood that fame scrambles your brain. So it's like, okay, but now if you have an entire generation where you've told them you have to operate as a celebrity or else you're nobody, that your life doesn't count if you don't have some measure, you don't have some following or whatever. Are you doing that same thing to them? And again, I do want to phrase it as, you can criticize Gen Z or Gen Alpha. It's like, oh, these people are all empty-headed and they have no attention span and they're just talking about skibbity toilet all day. It's like, if anything you dislike about them or their manner, that's something that was done to them as part of this grand experiment for which there was no control group, and that they did not agree to, and that nobody set the parameters for, of just, hey, what if these people all had to live their lives in public? What if they all had to operate by weird celebrity rules? Let's see what happens. And we have no idea what happens because there's no way to study it. We don't know what the long-term effects are on somebody's brain. You hear people using, sciencey terms about like dopamine overload or going on a dopamine fast, or what this does to your brain when you're just constantly seeking the stimulation and feedback or whatever. Honestly, we won't know for decades what the effects are. Maybe it's not that big of a deal, but it's something they didn't get to choose to participate in. They were thrown into a world where it's like, no, 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 this is how a human life is lived. You have this smartphone and you're either a part of the audience or you are a part of the show, and only that latter thing is really important.
Yeah. Well, I think it also adds this element of, I mean, like you were kind of saying, like we tend to kind of understand who we are by our immediate connections and the people that are in our actual community. And now that the community has been kind of non-localized to strangers as well, there's this parasocial element that I'm noticing. There's like a very specific kind of content where people are spending more time with content creators than they are their actual immediate relationships. And then, I mean, I'm sure you probably even feel this as somebody who's hosting videos every day, is like people are watching these and they get a sense that they know you. And then they're like holding you in this certain regard, which the way that they interact with you through comments, I could see this for people who are coming up in this. It can be very confusing because the people who are actually close to you probably know you less to a certain point.
But it's part of as I was saying earlier, that the idea that the way things are sold is, you buy this because you want the association with this personality you saw on a screen who you've decided is your friend or is part of your friend group, or that you owe them something or you want to support them somehow. Like this is a cause that I'm joining. And you can describe it as like a cult or something like that. But if you watch these streams, like they're talking to each other like they're friends, like we're all here hanging out, and that's just factually not what's happening.
Yeah.
So the
Yeah.
idea that I can then watch these guys do ads for gambling apps and their energy drink brand or their vape pod flavor, and they're using that to sell them junk food. And it's like, I'm going to pretend to be your friend for a few hours. I'm going to replace what used to be real life friendship in a human life. Instead, you're going to spend it with me because I am handsome or charismatic or cool or funny or interesting. So you're going to spend that time with me, where before you would have been spending it with somebody who was not as cool as me, but they were there.
Yeah.
And the misunderstanding of, because for people who are new to the subject and don't know the term parasocial relationship, it's a relationship that only goes one way. Like, that guy on your screen is not going to help you move if you need help moving to a new apartment. The things that friends do with each other, that guy's not going to give you a ride to the airport. That person's not going to be there to talk you down from suicide. That person's not going to be there to tell you when you've made a bad haircut choice and that everybody's laughing at you, to be the one to say, hey, everybody thinks your haircut looks stupid. All those things that a real life friend you depend on, that person is not giving that to you. They're giving you a very surface level sensation of, they say interesting things, they say funny things, and then they will read my name out on the chat during the stream if I pay them $5. And then they will try to sell me clothing, and I will feel like I'm a part of something. Again, it seems very harmless. I get that a lot of people find meaning in it and that they feel less alone in the world, but it is it is satisfying a hunger with something that isn't, it's not even the equivalent of junk food. It's more a picture of food instead of food. It doesn't do for you what friendship is supposed to do. It doesn't build a community, which is what, there's things that community does for you that this type of relationship just doesn't. So I try not to ever make somebody feel like I'm your internet friend or I'm your internet uncle or whatever. If I've told you something useful, that's great, but I don't want you to idolize me. I don't want you to feel like you need to try to be like me because you don't know me. You don't observe me in my everyday life. When I get on camera and I tell some interesting story for 2 minutes, that hasn't told you anything about what kind of person I am, about how unhealthy my habits are, about how unstable my moods are. I can't model for you how to live a human life the way a real life person would if you're spending every day with them, and realizing that a lot of the things that people are so scared of in everyday interaction, like of being cringe or embarrassing themselves, that that's common in the real world, in real relationships. That's normal to say, to tell a joke that nobody laughs at, to make a fool of yourself. That's what humanizes you. That's what we love about each other, are those flaws. But the more time you spend inside, the more time you spend with people with personalities who are putting on a presentation of themselves, the more out of touch you get with what the real world looks like, and the less tolerant you get of real world, relationships, because those relationships, compared to, the perfect presentation of somebody on a screen, are ugly and weird and awkward. It's them wanting to do something that you don't want to do. They want to go to some event that you have no mood to go to, but that's real life. Real life is compromising, and it's a give and take, and it's giving up part of yourself or changing part of your habits so you can get along with the group. That's what socializing is. But what a screen will promise you is a totally frictionless experience. It's like the equivalent of porn, where it's just, here's pictures. She doesn't talk back. She doesn't want anything. You don't have to do anything for her. She just, there's her body. You paid for it. Now you're looking at it, and the pleasure is very surface level, but it also cost you nothing. You didn't have to give anything of yourself, and it will be satisfying in the short term. It will feel good in the short term, but in the long run, you're not getting the thing that you evolved as an organism to need.
Yeah. And I think one of the really big effects of this too is our inability to communicate. And this is something that I'm noticing a lot in just kind of political discourse. I think a lot of people have their chosen purveyor of political dread, whatever side of the fence that you're on. And, we often form these relationships with these people, and we trust them to kind of tell us the way that reality is operating right now. And the more time we spend with them and the less time we spend with, say, the uncle at Thanksgiving who has a differing view than us, we're not actually engaging in the muscle of being able to have a disagreement and kind of flexing out how to regulate our nervous system when somebody sees the world differently, and learning how to kind of co-abide. And I think that that's really a big part of this kind of radicalization effort that's taking place in the country, where we just can't even talk to each other anymore. And it's hard to really discern what's true, what's not true, where people are coming from. Because the moment that they present any sort of differing opinion that we're not used to, because we're so used to the screen person telling us everything that we already agree with, we shut down, and we get really hard to interact with. And I think that that's really led to this kind of flashpoint of where we are right now in just how divided everybody is.
I also think it's just an illusion because if you say, for example, I don't want to, I don't know, this actor has come out and expressed some extremely unpopular view about Israel and Palestine or whatever. And so as a result, I'm not going to go watch their movie, or I'm going to get angry if somebody has them on their talk show. And like, I'm going to seal that off from my life. I'm going to boycott this person. I get that, but do you know the political views of the guy that came and repaired your roof last year? Or the guys that, when you went to the grocery store, the person who owns that grocery store, or the manager, do you know what their political views are? When you turn the lights on in your house, do you know the views of everybody who worked at the power plant, who mined the coal that they burned to give you the electricity? Every second of the day, you are interacting with somebody who bitterly disagrees with you on fundamental subjects. You're driving your car on tires made in a factory owned by a guy who disagrees with you. The car was repaired by a guy who disagrees with you on lots of subjects. Like, you can't live a human life without interacting with people who bitterly disagree. But I say we're all in this together. That's not like an aspirational bumper sticker slogan. I'm saying it's factual. We're a society where we're all integrated together. You depend on people who disagree with you and have fundamentally either different values, or they focus on different values, or they interpret how their values should come about in society differently than you. So the illusion that, well, on my social media and on my screens, I'm going to purge my life of all of these terrible people because they're all Nazis or communists or whatever. You can do that if you want, but it is an illusion. When you step outside your door, when you turn the faucet on in your kitchen, people who got that water to your faucet, people who supplied, who laid the concrete on the sidewalk you're walking on, some of those people disagree with you. And you still have to go out and interact with them and be in traffic with them and stand in line with them. You are going to be cooperating with them in a society one way or the other. So if you emotionally and mentally cannot, like, just conceive of having to cooperate with somebody that disagrees with you on some of these issues, that's like saying you can't handle gravity or sunlight. It's not going away. So trying to tell yourself, well, I have successfully, cut those people out of my life as a sign of how much I do not agree with them, or how disgusting I find their views. You can say that, but it's impossible. It is physically impossible to isolate yourself unless you go and live on a desert island somewhere. So knowing that you will have to exist in society with these people, and knowing that in this system, people are allowed to vote, and that the only way they're going to change how they vote is if someone convinces them it is in their best interest to vote differently. Now what? Now what are you going to do? Because again, you can think of yourself as like a monk who has secluded yourself to a serene position of, I'm not going to have these toxic people in my world, but that's purely an illusion. It's something that social media will make it appear you have done that, but you haven't really.
Yeah, yeah. So how would you, and you might not have an answer for this, but how would you, what would your antidote be for somebody who's really kind of caught in that trap of really buying into the illusion and trying to kind of cut people out of their lives? And I think that that's happening on both sides of the equation. How do we kind of move forward when the forces seem to be kind of profiting from us trying to fight against the illusion? I guess what would you say, like, moving forward as a people, we'd be able to do to try and combat that?
I think that is the catch-22. I think sitting around and thinking in terms of what's wrong with society, what do we need to do as a society, what's wrong with the world, I think that is kind of a numbing, process, because I think the human brain wasn't built to think in those terms of what does society need to be doing differently. The question is, what should I personally in my own life be doing differently? And I think this is fascinating because you can hear people out there saying, well, as Americans, our diet is just terrible. It's too much fast food, too much processed sugar, too much. It's like, yeah, but why are you sitting around worried about how 300 million people are eating? Why, when just managing what you eat is more than what most of us can handle. So that by itself of like, well, how can we as a society move past this? It's like, well, you don't have the ability to process how the society is functioning. The only thing you can handle is what you do. Because here's the thing, the algorithms that favor outrage or like shallow, stories about people behaving terribly or whatever, that's not going to go anywhere. In the same sense that, junk food is not going to go anywhere. They're not going to outlaw it. It's not possible. They would just create a black market for it. All you can do is control what you consume. You can control your own diet, what you buy, and your information diet is the exact same thing as your food diet. That some of this stuff is just the equivalent of junk food, where it is a video of somebody behaving terribly or saying something awful, and then you get that little dopamine hit of, wow, I hate the stranger, I'm glad I'm not like him. That's just a sugar rush from a candy bar. That did nothing to nourish you or make you smarter or better. And it definitely did not guide you toward some better morality for yourself. If all you do is just watch a freak show of other people behaving horribly, and that's what you watch all day, the conclusion you're going to draw is like, well, I'm better than those people just by sitting here doing nothing at all. When it would be better to fill your life with examples of people being heroic and selfless, and then you kind of feel bad about yourself thinking, well, why am I not out doing what that guy did? That guy stops and gives bottles of water to the homeless. Why is he? I could have done that. I can get some water. I could go, like, why? And so if you're focusing on just, what the awful people are doing and treating it as a real life reality show. I mean, there are subreddits that are just examples of people parking badly, and that's it. People will just browse all day. Look at this jerk. This guy in a BMW took up 4 spaces and parked across 2 handicap spaces. And here's a sad person in a wheelchair. Now they can't park their van. And it's like, that's a photo from 3 years ago from another country. You sat there and made yourself upset thinking about how somebody parked badly in France in 2019. Why was that relevant to your life? How did that help you? And of course it didn't. It just stimulated this brief little rush of adrenaline in your brain. It's like, I hate that person. Wow, I would never park that way. Okay, so didn't that just lower your standard of how you behave? Didn't that just lower your expectations of humanity? Isn't this the information equivalent of cigarettes, where it's just, it over time, it just builds up in your mind the way tar builds up in your lungs, and it will eventually, won't kill you, but it will eventually make you a miserable person who does what ultimately the algorithms want you to do, which is to be afraid of doing anything but sitting at home in front of a screen.
Yeah.
Because once you go out there, oh my gosh, there's street crime, and there's, people being rude, and there's racists, and there's bigots, and there's rioters, and there's carjackings, and people parking badly, and entitled Karens, all of these personality types of all the awfulness you're going to run into. The only safe place for you is to be at home monitoring all of the bad behavior on your screen. To what end? None at all. You're not helping the problem. You're not discouraging them from acting that way. It's just something that keeps you seated there because some company needs you to look at banner ads so they can pay their bills. And that's it. It's like, is that the destiny of your life, to just look at a series of advertisements so that somebody else can pay their staff and their server costs? Isn't there something you could be doing in your life more, anything at all more productive than this? The going out to your garage and building a birdhouse, something.
Yeah. Well, this is a great time for my ad read for Blue Chew. So, no, I'm just kidding. I think at the core of it, and it's something that I find interesting, is like what motivates us to take in content that upsets us. And I think right now, maybe, I mean, probably forever, I think human nature at a point is like very focused on the negative. I think that there's kind of this survival mechanism that's kind of always at play that's scanning for potential threats, which you can kind of see in a light of like, thank you so much, body, for orienting me in a way that protects me, but at the same time drives a lot of behavior that we actively kind of seek out the things that are intentionally going to upset us. And I think the algorithm kind of enhances this, but I also think it's almost like a reflection of us, right? Like it's not really, I mean, it's preying off of something that is already there. And I feel like where we're at right now, and we're just inundated with so many examples of things that are happening that are just terrible. I think like what you're saying, it takes an intentional effort to actually try and be inspired. I think inspiration is kind of like one of the big things. It's like seeing somebody who's doing something dope and then having the aspiration to kind of get involved in that kind of space or to recreate that for other people. And I think that there's kind of a moment where if somebody's on this track where they're just in the momentum of taking in bad stuff, where they have to like dig their heels into the sand and kind of like create a new intention. And I think that that's like a really tricky thing to do when we're caught in momentum. There's kind of like a riptide pulling us out to the sea of aggression, but it takes a certain something to be like, wait, I'm fucking miserable. I don't know how to, I think that there's like a moment where you have to kind of come to terms with like, I don't feel so good living life this way. And it's kind of a painful thing to do. It kind of requires you to really meet yourself and be honest and humbled by just the effect of that action. And I think that that takes like a certain kind of training, maybe, or a certain kind of practice, and I think we have to, we're just not very well equipped to handle discomfort in a lot of situations.
And I'm not confused as to why people have a bias toward negativity. I mean, that's just evolution. If you are, if there's five trees in front of you and one of them has a tiger behind it, the person who sat back and said, well, yeah, but we should take a moment to appreciate the four trees that are tiger free. We should appreciate them all equally. It's like, no, no, no. You're going to zoom in on the one that presents danger. That's the one you're going to ignore all the rest because only one matters right now. It's the one that's got the tiger. The problem is that if you take that same animal and say, I'm going to give you data on all of the tigers in the world and all of the trees they're behind, you've now paralyzed them because it's like, well, now the thing this mechanism was supposed to do, which was to give my body adrenaline, this fight or flight response, supposed to give me adrenaline and dopamine and all of these things to energize me to do something about the tiger. If you say, okay, well, actually, here's where all 4 million tigers in this country are right now. Well, what am I supposed to do with that information? And it's the same thing where if somebody is, selling junk food, they would say, this is not, all I'm doing is giving people what they want. They want potato chips. It's delicious. It makes them happy to eat it. It's like, that's true. You can say that yourself, all I did was present them a piece of reality. I showed them a video of somebody freaking out in a grocery store. They found it interesting. It's not my fault. You can choose to not consume that. You can choose to not watch it. You can choose to not smoke the cigarettes or eat the cheeseburger or eat the potato chips. And that's true. But also, you have a mechanism in your brain that these products are taking advantage of. There's a reason why Red Bull hits you different than water from a creek. One of them is naturally occurring. The other one was engineered to hit you in a certain way, to activate certain sensations and to kind of override your brain and get you addicted to it to different degrees, And so whether it's a video game, whether it's sports betting on your phone, all of these things, it's like, well, yeah, but the user ultimately makes the choice, and that's true. But the best thing as that user you can acknowledge is that you are prone to being addicted to certain harmful things, that short-term pleasure will kill you in the long run. And that's the thing, is that, again, you can lobby for whatever you want, for some sort of controls on social media, age limits when kids can get accounts. So, some countries are doing, that's fine. Ultimately, on an individual basis, only you can manage your own diet. It's just, there's always going to be a place to find these things. And the best thing you can do is try to get into a state of mind and step outside of yourself and say, I'm getting very angry right now about something that does not affect me at all. And, because and ask yourself, well, what action is this prompting me to take? If I already know how I'm going to vote, what is this? Is this motivating me to donate to somebody, to go out and volunteer, to do something, to join a protest? That's fine. If the information has motivated you to change your actions or take some sort of different action, that's fine. But the social media environment as it exists right now does not want you to do any of those things. It wants you to stay glued to a screen. The only the only reason most of this content exists is for you to look at the content. It's not for anything else. It doesn't, it's, the whole idea of a brain that takes in information is you take in the information and then you take action. There's a tiger behind the tree. Now that I know that, I'm going to go do this. But what they're trying to get you to do is not to take any of that action. The ideal customer for these sites and these platforms is somebody who just stays glued to the screen 16 hours a day, maybe more than that, because they're so scared of turning it off. Like if I'm not here to monitor the bad people 24/7, then what? What will happen? What will happen if I'm not here to observe exactly how the terrible thing these people say every single day? It's like, okay, so but what are you going to do about it? And here's where people will say, well, there's nothing you can do. We're all helpless in this situation. Everything's screwed. It's like, yeah, that's what they wanted you to think, because that makes you the perfect customer. You just stare at the screen and observe your own doom.
Yeah, yeah. So, knowing this as you do, what are your rules for navigating the internet? Because you're somebody who's posting every day. You're probably getting a lot of comments, a lot of interactions. Your phone is probably a pretty activated place at this point. So, how do you personally, on a day-to-day basis, relate to the internet in a way that keeps you sane? Or are you also going insane with the rest of us?
I occasionally get complaints that I don't interact with the comments on my videos. That's something I learned not to do a long, long time ago. I don't check my mentions on Twitter. I don't see what strangers are saying about me because it's none of my business for the most part. And this really upsets some people, because it's like, well, no, you should be in there interacting with people. It's like, no, the video was, I said what I had to say in the video. If you want to go in the comments and discuss it, you like it, you don't, that's fine. But I'm not going to go in there and fight with you. But that's what people want, is they want to have a piece of you, to be able to. And it's like, this video has 6,000 comments. Do you want me to go in and reply to all of them? Like that, I clearly can't do that. So at some point, and this was not the case if you had went back and found me in 1999, when I would have a blog post and have 12 comments on the blog. It was very different. It felt like I was obligated to talk to each one of those people. But there's a point where I had to draw a boundary of where I would interact and what I would do. My situation is not typical for most people, because I have a following, because I've been doing this for 27 some years or whatever. But everybody has to have that boundary that they form, where they're going to say, if I've got a family member on Facebook and they post nothing but like right-wing rage bait every day and memes, where it's like some bad AI drawing of Trump and he's whatever. It's like, okay, you can unfollow that person, you can mute them, you can use those tools to just not, if you can't resist interacting with that, if you can't resist getting upset by it, you have to manage yourself in the same way that an alcoholic knows to avoid certain gatherings or certain, businesses, because they know they're not going to be able to resist drinking if they're there. Or somebody's on a diet, you intentionally don't go to eat at certain restaurants. You intentionally avoid certain occasions because you have gotten to know yourself and what your weaknesses are and what you're addicted to. So I routinely fail at doing this. My attempts to set these boundaries get broken all the time. But for example, the hate I get in comments and that I get in my public inboxes is nothing like what young women get. It's totally different. And the stalkers that I get are very mild compared to what I know for a fact young women get who have a YouTube show or whatever, where they've decided they are entitled to some part of them that was not offered in the video or whatever. So my ability to set those boundaries is easier than what other people have. And if I wanted to, I could hire somebody to filter that stuff for me. I don't, but I'm in a position where it is easier for me than it is for a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah, I think what's really important for a lot of people to know, and this is the way that I've kind of conceptualized interacting with technologies, I kind of view it, and you've kind of alluded to this, is it's kind of like a drug. It's like, I mean, it is something we're just taking in with our eyes and our ears, and there's a tactile sense of scrolling that has its own quality, but it has physiological ramifications, especially if you're constantly being inundated with rage bait and all of that. Like, it is affecting your brain chemistry in a way. And I think moving forward, because we don't have the data on how this affects us, having that kind of relationship, seeing it in the same way that we view food, it allows us a sense of space to be able to make choices about it. Whereas I think when you don't have that kind of clarity and you don't really have the proper framework for it, it's really loose and kind of fuzzy on what exactly it is. It's like I'm just like looking at my phone. It's very just kind of plain, but when you really take into effect, like, yeah, this is changing my brain chemistry, my dopamine, my cortisol, especially. And I think like that has helped me kind of create a relationship with it that, again, isn't perfect. And I think, as you're also saying, it's like these things, our relationship is going to change. There are going to be days that are better, there's going to be days that are worse. And the same as when we're dieting, sometimes we might have a piece of cheesecake. And I think it's just really helpful to really take in the full brevity of what this thing is doing to us.
And we're adults too. I get that why a parent would struggle to keep the iPad away from their child. I do. I understand that it is so normalized. I'm not a parent. It would be very easy for me to say, well, why don't you just personally tend to your child every hour of the day? It's like, no,
Hmm.
the 10 minutes that I get of quiet to myself is when they get engrossed in a game on the iPad or something like that. I give it to them because otherwise I will go crazy. But you are exposing them to something, the same reason we don't let our kids drink alcohol or do certain drugs or whatever, because their brains are not equipped to handle it at that age. A developing brain is not equipped to be dependent on certain things. And society has a way of saying that, well, if you are raising a child in the normal way, here's what's normal. And it's normal that by age 6, they have their own smartphone or whatever. But
Yeah.
the reality is, they are not. There is software that was developed by experts specifically to be addictive. Every
Yeah.
app maker, this is not a conspiracy theory. They have people employed to just measure time spent on the app, and then they will make tweaks to keep you on the app. It is designed to be addictive in the same way that any drug is designed to be addictive. It is getting the brain caught in a loop where you start to not sense the passage of time. You start to not sense how much of your mental energy is being devoted to this, because your energy and attention are finite. So
Yeah.
that you are exposing a child to something that they are not. Most adults don't have are not equipped to resist this. A child's brain literally is not formed all the way, so they are so much more vulnerable to all of the tools that are there to get them not just to fall down a rabbit hole of staring at images on a screen, but to spend money and to get them, where you got this game and to get you addicted to it. It's like a Skinner box, and it's been designed to get you addicted. And now for only $1.99, you can buy 3 more lives, or else you have to wait until tomorrow to play. And all of your friends are on there, and they're all spending money, and so it's holding all of your social relationships hostage. Everything around. So, and it's again, it's going after someone who has no immunity to the thing they're trying to do to you. So
Yeah.
that's why, and I get that, laws that, prevent kids from having social media accounts, but, as minors seem very draconian, but there has to be something, because I think the average parent doesn't understand how predatory platforms like Roblox are. Things that seem very
Yeah.
innocent, and all you know is that they seem to really love doing it, and they will be quiet and they will stare at the screen for hours at a time. But it's like, They are falling into an ecosystem that they don't understand what's being done to them because they have no context for it.
Yeah.
That this is
Yeah.
something that is specifically trying to draw them in and prevent them from doing or thinking about anything else, and that they can't go out to do things that kids always love to pass, like go to the zoo or whatever, without just, they'll be in front of the monkeys and they'll just be staring at a screen the whole time.
Of
It's like, well,
monkeys.
yeah, but look, you've never seen a monkey before in your life. Isn't this interesting? It's like, well, no, the monkey cannot provide entertainment at the same interval as the screen. And that's bad because real life is never going to operate at that pace. And real life is going to require you to do things and learn things that cannot provide pleasure at that same interval as the screen.
Yeah.
It never will. So it's not preparing you to be able to do things that are going to be required of you in the real world. And
Yeah.
again, it's fine in moderation. Anything's fine in moderation, but we're not moderating it at
Yeah.
all in many cases.
Yeah. And I do think, I was thinking about the notion of like the content of what you're taking in versus like the process of how you're taking something in. And I think like developmentally speaking, when a child is like growing up, my understanding is like the way that their brain develops, it's very kinesthetically focused. So that's why they're always running and playing and climbing and crawling. And all of that informs them how to orient in reality. They learn things that you can only learn by falling down and busting up your elbow or getting stung by a bee or playing in a creek. Those are all these like somatic lessons that help them learn about just other elements of life. And I think when we replace that with a tablet that's very flat and you're just touching with your finger, like the kinesthetic sense of that as your brain is developing, it kind of mutes your ability to feel fully. I feel like there's a sense of kind of reducing reality to something that is two dimensional in a way. Like you have just this thing and it's on the screen. And I think that that really takes away from a lot of like the magic of what being a child is like. There's something about like a nice summer night where like there's fireflies and you're with your friends and you're eating s'mores that's just very tactile and real. And I think that we're trading a lot of that just for this. Admittedly, there's a lot of content, but again, the process is just very reduced. And I think that we don't really know the effects of that quite yet.
And I know that we sound like extremely old people, and the same thing they would say back in the day about watching too much TV. And I remember being a kid, and they called it the idiot box or the boob
Yeah.
tube, and
Yeah.
the TV's riding your brain. And the generation before that, it was comic books. Why aren't you reading the classics? Why aren't you out in the sun? Why are you in your room reading these trashy comics, these superheroes? Why are you wasting your time? But the issue is that it is objectively true. As a kid, you have to get out and play with other kids to observe how to be around other people, not because it's fun, but because it's often not. How do you interact when another kid annoys you? How do you act when another kid threatens you or violates your personal space or insults you? How do are you able to observe their reactions and how they react to what you did, what you said? Are you able to change and measure your personality by observing how other people react to what you do and what you say, to learn how to be a person? You have to get that practice, and it is often not pleasant. It's embarrassing. Kids make fun of you or bully you, but by doing that, you learn how people operate. You learn that these kids are bullying me not because they hate me, but because it is a bonding ritual among them. This is something they're doing for each other. You have to observe that. You have to see it for your own eyes and understand it. You have to understand, to get hurt and have friends cut you off and have rumors spread about you, to deal with all these unpleasant things in real life, because you are going to have to deal with that in real life. You get to the workplace later on as an adult, whatever you're doing, you have to understand, why did these people suddenly turn on me? Why did they cut me out of this project? Why didn't I get this promotion? It's like, well, it's because the boss didn't like you. Well, why didn't he like me? Because you never learned how to socialize. You don't know how to make people feel comfortable around you. And if they're not comfortable around you, they're not going to want to work with you. So you never learned how to be a person that other people want to be around, that are comfortable being around, because you had the screen telling you that, well, all of your friends are on here and they're all hiding behind avatars and they're all hiding behind false versions of themselves. And if somebody annoys you, you can just block them. But in real life, that guy who annoys you is going to be working on the assembly line next to you. It's going to be waiting tables next to you. And you can't just cut them out. You have to work with them. You have to function with them and exist in the same space. And knowing how to navigate that is not obvious. It takes a ton of practice. And if you are depriving yourself of that practice where all of your relationships are held at arm's length through a screen or through some sort of a parasocial thing where it only flows one direction, you're not going to learn how to do it. Everything takes practice. And so something that I guess we should have mentioned the book by now, but something that comes up in the book is just that social anxiety and the way people all talk about anxiety and how, well, I don't go to these events because it's so bad for my social anxiety. Well, it is provably true that social anxiety gets better with exposure to social situations because so much of the anxiety is just dealing with the unknown. And you're at a party and you're worried that you're wearing the wrong clothes or you're doing the wrong thing or that this joke wasn't appropriate. You don't know what to say. Well, it's not, yeah, you don't know what to say because you don't have any practice. Be the same thing if you put me out, suddenly if I went to a baseball game and they said, "Hey, we need you to come down from the stands and bat for this guy. We need you to bat cleanup today." It's like, why? Like, yeah, it's a rule that one fan has. Like, I have no idea. I don't even know the rules well enough to do that. I would be very nervous because I've not been spending years. Well, you have to know how to do the things in everyday life that are not part of work, that are just part of living a life. It all takes practice. Knowing how to be a person requires practice. And being at home in front of a screen is not functioning as a person, not all the way. If you've got a job where that's the only thing you have to do, then I guess, yeah, you've learned how to write an email, you've learned how to type in Slack in a way that everybody interprets it. But at some point, you are going to have to interact with people in real life. It's going to happen. There will never be a world where you never have to do that, where we've all just been uploaded as an avatar to a computer.
Yeah.
So in the book, a lot of what happens is a case where what starts as people interpreting it as, well, I'm just awkward around other people, goes to a very dark place because when a situation comes up where it would be very helpful if they were having an honest conversation with each other, they don't have the social tools to have that conversation. So you have a misunderstanding. This is a very mild spoiler for the book. You have a situation that keeps spinning out of control because nobody involved knows how to speak to one another because the algorithms have not trained you to do that. The algorithms have trained you for either snark or outrage or just being dismissive or repeating some kind of a slogan, whatever, things that would not be productive in a conversation that you were in, a dispute you were trying to resolve in real life. So this book is about that seemingly small, inconsequential phenomenon spinning out of control to like an apocalyptic level.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the, it's funny with what's going on right now. There's a real world application where we're seeing in movie theaters. I don't know if you're familiar with the Minecraft movie and the wildness that's taking place in a lot of these. Have you heard of this at all?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think for people who haven't heard, there's a specific scene where a character says a thing, and during this, all of the teens who are in the movie theater will just absolutely trash the movie theater. They'll throw popcorn, they'll throw slushies, they're getting into fights, falling over each other, and it's just a really raucous thing. And I think, kind of to what you're saying is like we're watching this, as a meme, so a lot of people see that and they're like, oh, this is what people are doing. So then when they get into the space, they do the same thing. And what they're not recognizing, probably because a lot of them haven't had jobs yet, is like there's a staff there that has to clean this and take care of this. There's families who are trying to bring their kids there who are now having a bad time. And it's just kind of this like viral contagion of chaos that's just spreading through movie theaters at this point.
Okay, but here's my question. Is it? Or is that something that happened like 3 times and we've just seen the same clip over and over again? And that in reality, in the tens of thousands of showings of this film, 99.9% of them are totally quiet. But because we
That's
got a viral video of a couple of people throwing their popcorn and shouting, because they were doing it for content. They were being
yeah.
recorded. Like they did this for something they could post on social media. But is it a thing that's happening every time you go see the movie? Or if I went to go see a matinee showing right now after this recording, would I in fact just find 20, 25 people kind of sitting in there quietly watching the movie.
Mm.
Do you see what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
legitimately don't know. I'm not
Yeah.
saying
I
that
guess
it's
I
a
don't either.
manufactured phenomenon. I'm saying that because everybody's talking about it, you get the sense that it's the same thing that you will hear, like Republicans in rural areas who are scared to death to just visit San Francisco because they think the moment you set foot in the city, you will be dragged out of your car and murdered. And it's
Hmm.
like, well, no, I have people, I know people who live there. It's, they've had some cars get broken into, but no, they go out and they eat and they go to concerts and they go to bars and they take walks. It's a city that people live in, but because they've seen actual video, it's not staged, of terrible crimes happening, of carjackings, of gang violence. It's like, oh my God, it's just a war zone. I can't imagine even driving through one of those cities. I'd be terrified. It's like, okay, is it, how common are those things? You don't know because your brain can't process that. Your brain
Yeah.
doesn't know what proportion of, of the bad thing is happening versus not happening, because again, the times when it doesn't happen, that's the tree that doesn't have the tiger behind it. So your brain's like, well, who cares about that? It's like, yeah, but if you have created for yourself an illusion that every tree has a tiger behind it, you now just have an incorrect view of the world.
Yeah.
So if you have someone who is, gotten to where they're basically afraid to go out and do things because, like, well, I'm not going to go see that Minecraft movie in the theater because a bunch of kids will probably throw popcorn on me. It's like, okay, is that actually happening in every showing? Because to me, it seemed like this is like 20 guys who all got together to go see the movie the same night. Very hard to get that many people organized to go to a thing. I think it's probably very rare. How many people even have that many friends? But also, they're getting out and doing something in real life. Good. They went out. They went out and they got into some trouble. That's the thing they used to do as kids. You would go out in the woods and you would fall down in the creek and break your arm, or you would go out and do stuff that the grown-ups told you not to do, and that's how you learned about the world. That's a valuable thing, going out and misbehaving and then finding out where the guardrails are and what the consequences are. Uh, this is something that I didn't learn until many years later, that was a key part of being a teenager, was getting in trouble. And
Yeah.
you're supposed to be obnoxious. You're a
Hmm.
teenager. You're supposed to go out. You're supposed to try on what it's like to be a terrible person and then realize, oh, okay, yeah, it's not, I don't like it.
Yeah.
This is why that's why I hate the trend of like digging up somebody's tweets from when they were 17. I had a bunch of racist stuff they wrote when they were 17. It's like, yeah, they were a child. They were trying it on. They were seeing it. And then they got the pushback and it's like, okay, yeah, you're right. I shouldn't be like that. But this is what teenagers do. You want to push boundaries and see, like, find out where the world pushes back. At the same thing, people get frustrated when a toddler runs around their house and breaks like a vase or something. It's like, God, these kids are just destroying everything. It's like the toddler is trying to learn how much force you can apply to a thing before it breaks. Their brain is trying to program themselves about how physics work. The toddler jumped off the back of the sofa and landed on the thing and broke it because their brain's trying to find out how much force can a coffee table take before it breaks. Which things are safe to jump on? What happens when you fill up the sink with water and let it overflow? What happens to the water? It doesn't know any of those things. That's its brain rapidly trying to program itself. It is experimenting with the laws of physics. So yeah, it's running around the house painting things on walls. It doesn't know what's going to happen when you smear paint on a wall. It has to see it. It has to find out. Yes, it's annoying, but that's part of growing up, is getting out into the world and breaking things and hurting yourself and saying, okay, now I know this. You don't touch the stove when it's on. It's hot. It will burn your hand. Most of us had to do it before we found out. But cars used to have cigarette lighters in them. I think every single kid growing up my generation had a circular burn on their palm where they put the thing in there, took it and just poked it. It's like, why did you do that? It's like, because I didn't know what would happen. Now I do. I did it one time. I never did it again. So a lot of the things that people do that we see as like antisocial youth behavior, it's like, well, no, they're trying to, they're going out and experimenting. They're testing what happens when a bunch of us get together in a group and get rowdy. I don't know. It's not the apocalypse. Kids have had stupid things. You can go find photos from the 1920s where a bunch of like high school kids would try to stuff themselves into a phone booth. They'd see how many they could get in there. They'd get like 20 guys into one phone booth. They would all cram in there. It was a whole trend. They'd sit
Yeah.
on top of flagpoles. It's just, why? Why do it? Because you're only a kid once. You go out and do something stupid, and then you do it, and then everybody gets mad at you, and then it's over. That's the way it's supposed to work.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think that that process of trying new things and seeing if you can't break something is something that I think people should have a little bit of even as they get older. I think that's what I recognize a lot as I get into my 30s and see people around me. We tend to limit kind of the audacity of our behavior, which to some degree is like a good thing. But I think like the creative instinct actually requires you to kind of go out and to still try and find places where you can push on boundaries in a healthy way. And I think that that's something that helps us kind of stay buoyant and able to, again, have these communications with people that we might disagree with. I think that is in a way, it's like, well, how can I word things in a way that meets your boundary and maybe goes beyond it? And then we can actually form like a connection or relationship. And I think that that process is one that is kind of never ending, but it just kind of changes and refines. But yeah, I see a lot of people that kind of close that down and then they become really routine and it just limits the ability to see the world kind of in a fresh way.
Because what you're going to find out is if you get to know anybody well enough, you're going to find out that you've got mostly everything in common. It's you if you disagree fundamentally on like political issues, it's generally because you've either believed different information or you just have a different interpretation of how of like how your values can be brought into the world. Like no one thinks crime is good. Nobody's like, yes, more crime. If they're saying that, they're trolling. Nobody actually wants. Everyone agrees has the same value that peace and law and order are good. The question comes into, well, but how? Somebody's like, well, the only way you stop it is that somebody commits a crime, you lock them up and throw away the key, lock them up forever, zero tolerance. And then my position is, I don't think that factually works. I think the data says that is not effective. I think that people make mistakes. I think people make mistakes for different reasons. Most people are not evil. A lot of people have addictions. They have personality disorders. A lot of times they just, I don't know, they got in a mood and they did something they wouldn't normally do. And then a lot of people, if they're corrected, they'll never do it again. That's my view on crime. Other people are so scared of it, and it may be that they're more scared of it because they've been a victim of it more than I have. I've never been the victim of a violent crime. Maybe if I had been, maybe my view would be, hey, death penalty for all of this. Don't give them a chance to do it a second time. If a guy ever gets in a fight in public or if he tries to rob somebody at gunpoint, that's it. They get one chance, they go away. My view is 90 some percent of the guys that do that when they're young, you come find those guys at age 45, they're not doing it anymore. They aged out of it. They settled down and they'll all say the same thing. Like, nah, in my youth, I was an idiot. I grew up, I didn't have a dad. We didn't have any money. I fell in with a bunch of dudes. Your peer group is heavily influential into what your behavior is. So it's like, hey, I fell in with a bunch of ruffians, and we all went out and did crime together. But if after a while, a couple of them went to jail, I got scared out of it, and I got a job and got married and settled down. And now I've got 3 kids. The upstanding members of your community, you can sit them down and ask them to tell the craziest thing they did when they were 16, and in many cases, it would curl your toes. You would not believe the stuff they got up to. And these days, these people are city councilmen and they are preachers and they are cops. But when they were the youths, like, oh yeah, I stole a car when I was 17 and crashed it in a lake. My dad had to cover it up because he was a lawyer and he got me off. And it's like, that's my view. So if I'm talking to somebody who thinks we have fundamental differences because they want to be much, much tougher on crime, they want more prisons, more cops, and I'm saying I don't think that's the answer. I don't know that we fundamentally disagree that much. We both agree that crime is bad. We just disagree on the details of the approach and how to reduce the most crime without infringing on the most people's rights. It's a complicated problem, but online, the way we would communicate that is in a way that just pushes each other away, where they would say that I just love crime and love gangs and want to see people get victimized because I just love suffering. And then I could call them a fascist and say they're racist and they just want to lock up everybody that disagrees with them. And we would pretend like we're on totally different planets when, for the most part, very rarely is that the case. Like it's the thing that everybody yells about right now is immigration. In my view, immigration is like a paperwork issue. It's a bureaucracy thing. We have an inefficient system for immigrating, but we have to have some kind of a system. Every country does. I think it's boring, but online one side would be calling it an invasion, that we're being invaded, our entire culture is being destroyed, and the other side say, no, you are literal Nazis, you want to put people in concentration camps. In reality, I think if we both were in charge of actually setting the policy, we would come up with something very similar to each other. It's only when we have one tweet's worth of information to relay that we
Yeah.
take the most cartoonish version of our view. And I just think for the most part, it's not helpful. It doesn't bring people closer to understanding an issue. It doesn't actually clarify their own values about it, because for the most part, people's values are largely the same. Everybody acknowledges that at some point in the past, everybody's family was an immigrant. So how different can we really be, unless again you're just arguing about these things as a form of entertainment, and so therefore you're motivated to take the most extreme crazy version of it purely because that's the most fun.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think a big part of it too is I think we all want to be right. We want to be seen as like a good person. And I think we have this like mythic understanding of what being a good person is, or like a hero. It's almost always defined by there being kind of a villain or somebody who is wrong. And I think we really are kind of caught in this dynamic of right and wrong. So if we have a different opinion, then one of us is going to be the victor, one of us is going to be the loser. And I'm for sure not going to be the loser. I've thought about this a lot. So clearly, it already activates this kind of aggression principle that comes up. And I think at the core of it, it kind of sounds like what you're saying. There's like I feel like the entire country, the entire world, really there's a fabric of goodness that we actually, most of us have. And it's like, it's just this kind of surface level, right, wrong kind of thing, wanting to be the good person that kind of keeps us from really being able to access that and remember that when we interact with people. And I think that that's where a lot of folks kind of get caught. And yeah, I think that's where a lot of the aggression comes from, is just the inability to just be like, I was wrong about something.
Yeah, and there's not really a reward for doing that, for acknowledging that if you've heard, now that I've heard more information, I agree that it was. So, for example, like the- you know, it, I feel like I am pressured on social media to have an opinion on tariffs, which is something I remember reading about like in grade school because of some tariff scandal and the whatever in the robber baron era. But if you had quizzed me 2 years ago, like Jason, what's the rate on tariffs on cars that are shipped into this country from Japan? I'd be like, I don't know. Like, why do you think they're too high? Like, I don't know. Where does the money go? Like, who collects the money? What is it used to fund something, or how much cheaper would the cars be? Like, what you feel about the unfair tariff situation between the goods we send to China? Like, I don't know. What are they? And if you had come to me and said, well, 2 years from now, Bernie Sanders is going to be president, and he's going to impose a bunch of tariffs because he says it's going to protect like labor jobs, like union jobs in the United States. That the reason all the factories get shipped overseas is because a lot of these countries, it's an unfair. So he's going to put a bunch of tariffs to try to build up the labor unions and to bring home more auto plants. I'd say like, oh, yeah, I can. I guess that makes sense. A lot of those factories got moved out of the country in the 80s and 90s. I guess it would be nice to bring those back. Those are good, good union jobs. I guess it should be. But then if you flipped it and said, well, actually, it's Donald Trump doing all that, and immediately I'm like, yeah, that's Nazi stuff. The tariffs. I've always hated tariffs my whole life. So I'm supposed to sit here and pretend like I know what any of this is, and I don't. I'm sorry, I don't have an education on. I've tried to catch up, but you want me to sit here and get mad about tariffs? I don't know. What am I? I know how I'm going to vote already. I,
Yeah. Yeah, there's
so
there's a
so I have
lot
to
of
pretend to be an
experts.
expert, not just pretend to be an expert. I have to pretend to have an emotional reaction to the thing, and I just don't. I don't. I don't want to pay more for stuff. I can say that. Is that all right? Is that enough? Do I have to get outraged by it? Yeah. The stock market seems like they really hate it. Okay. Yeah. Sounds like that's bad for, let's not do it then. I don't know what you, I don't know. I can't come on and perform outrage every day because I have a finite amount of energy and time in my life, and my friends need it, and my family needs it, and my publisher needs it. I've got deadlines. How much of my emotion do you want for a thing that next month is going to be, it's going to be something totally different? Maybe the drones will come back, and I'm supposed to be upset about that again.
I hope they come back. I don't think I'd be upset at this point. Well, we are kind of getting to a point here, so I feel like we could just keep going and going, and that's great. But I do want to respect your time. So I want to give a moment for you to kind of just plug how people can kind of stay in touch with you, how they can support you, get more of what you're offering, and yeah, where can people find you?
Well, my username is Jason K. Pargin, Pargin, on every platform pretty much. TikTok is the one that I'm biggest on. If TikTok gets banned, I'm also under that username on all of the Twitter alternatives like Blue Sky, and also on Instagram and Facebook and elsewhere. The book that we've been kind of talking around is called I'm Starting to Worry About This Black Box of Doom. And it is a ticking clock thriller about a bunch of people who think they have found out a terrorist attack is happening, but they are all like internet true crime types. And if you've ever tried to follow a terrible event unfold in real time, like a mass shooting or domestic terror attack, and you're trying to follow it on Twitter and have seen how quickly rumors start to drown out everything else, and trying to figure out what's actually real and what's not, it's that. It is people trying to fight against an information environment that is so polluted that the truth is struggling to get out. And if they can't get to the truth in time, disaster will occur. So that, it's not a very mild spoiler, say that chaos ensues as it does in real life every time something like this happens.
Yeah. Yeah, and I can vouch it is a wonderful read. So I just finished it up about 2 weeks ago, and I can put my seal of approval on it. So yeah. Well, awesome. Jason, thank you so much for joining me and just having this conversation. And I hope that things continue to go well for you. And I'm really looking forward to whatever you come up with next.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, we'll see you soon. All right, everybody, that was the episode. Thank you so much for listening all the way through until the end. I truly do make this show for you. That was Jason Pargin. Again, you can find him over at johndiesattheend.com or on any of his social media handles, Jason K. Pargin. If you want to support this show, head on over to patreon.com and consider becoming a member. It's hugely beneficial in these trying times. Beyond that, you can just like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, subscribe on YouTube. I see every one of you who does it, and I extend my heart to you. So we will catch you in a couple more weeks with another episode. Thank you, thank you, thank you.